This is Laricy Live, and I'm your host, Matt Laricy. We're giving you unfiltered access to the world of real estate, where we can cover the market trends, news, and honest answers to keep you ahead of the real estate game. Laricy Live is brought to you by Lincoln Title. Lincoln Title is the best and most efficient title company in Chicago and is the best place to close your property. This podcast is brought to you by Titan Builders. Titan Builders have been remodeling condos and homes in the Chicagoland area for over 35 years. Whether it's remodeling your kitchen or bathroom or getting your home ready for sale, Mike and Mark are your go-to guys. Laricy Live is brought to you by Guaranteed Rate and Ben Cohen. Ben Cohen is the #1 lender in Illinois and can close your loan in as fast as 8 days. So today we are here to talk about a little bit about what I'm calling the consolidation here, right? We got a lot of things going on in the real estate industry, which I think are kind of important to talk about because a lot of people are bringing them up. This affects agents, this affects brokerages, this affects buyers, this affects sellers, this affects deals. It affects everything, essentially. So what is consolidating? Well, there was that big shakeup about a year ago where App Properties was bought by Compass. They were very big rivals. For those that don't remember, when Compass first came to Chicago, App Properties took out billboards across the city with a compass on the billboard and said, work with somebody that knows the area that's local. So essentially saying that they were from out of town and weren't familiar with where they're going. Obviously, as we saw, App was then acquired and bought by Compass. So now they're essentially one company. Although they affiliate as two separate companies, there's a boss, and let's face it, the guy runs it, so he's got the say. Then you've had Baird & Warner, which is the old family-owned brokerage in Chicago, just picked up a company called Dreamtown. Dreamtown was a good-size office. They had good market share in the city, so those two consolidated. So now you've got more consolidation going on. And then, of course, the latest news is that Compass just acquired Anywhere. So Anywhere is essentially any real estate company that you've heard of. Century 21, Coldwell Banker, Corcoran, Sotheby's, essentially any company there is out there. The only companies that are left are essentially KW, Remax, EXP, Real, and your small independent companies like myself and some others. So we're seeing a big consolidation across the board, and this is going to affect how real estate is transacted in the future in a very big way. So what does this mean kind of more for just on an agent basis for agents out there? Just, they're going to have to decide where to go and what their culture they're looking for, right? I don't think it really has an effect on, your day-to-day right this second. In the future, I believe it will. I think it'll affect on where people decide to go. So I think if for people who are really agent-focused, we're not focused on always constantly getting 600 to 2,000 agents. But I think for companies like that, I think they're going to struggle a little bit to try to compete on recruitment for that type of stuff. But I do think that's probably a few years away. But on the short term, that is something I'm sure people are a little bit nervous about. I think for some people, they're going to say, well, how does this affect consumers? Well, consumers care where you work. I mean, I can tell you right now that we work at a company called AmeriCorp. When I first got in the business, some people cared. This was pre-internet. This was when internet was becoming something, but it wasn't where it is today. You didn't have it on your phone. You'd have to pay a lot extra to be able to try to get it. iPhones were kind of starting to become a thing, but not everybody had one. And now with the internet, honestly, I don't really think people even ask where I'm at. In fact, we'll get the listing and we'll send out the listing agreement and they'll be like, oh, this is the company. So it's almost irrelevant. And most agents, although they claim, they care about their big company, almost every agent I see brands themselves as whatever their team is, and they act like their team is their company. So I don't think really the company aspect itself is, the big consolidation of taking over pretty much 70% of agents will matter. Because you have to remember that Compass just went from 41,000 agents to I think it's 375,000. That's a big share. But it's just important to understand where does this mean for the industry itself? One of the biggest things is just understanding that, politically speaking, and real estate in general, we have some of the biggest lobbyists. And, when you want things to change in the industry, if you pretty much hold all the cards, you're kind of in charge. You're like the unelected leader that actually dictates what's happening. It's kind of like what happens in politics where you have these huge donors who they're not really in charge, but, essentially with their money you get elected and without your money you don't get elected. So they're going to have to start listening to it. And it's kind of crazy because when Compass bought Anywhere, like you have to remember the hatred between those two companies too. Like, Anywhere despised Compass more than anything in the world. They're about as big of rivals as you can imagine. Like, I don't think a rival gets bigger. I mean, it was like pure and utter hatred. The best example would be as if like Pepsi, which is like the smaller, soft drink company, buys Coca-Cola, like the guard that's been around for like everybody knows in the world, Coca-Cola. Most people know Pepsi, but like, it's nowhere near the strength of a brand as a Coca-Cola. No matter what anybody says out there, you say you like them more, that's just not true. Or like Burger King, which a lot of people really like, buys McDonald's. Like McDonald's is McDonald's, right? Burger King is always going to be like the step kid. It's never going to be as big of a McDonald's. But if Burger King all of a sudden bought McDonald's and now McDonald's works for Burger King, people would be like, wow, that's a pretty crazy move. That's the way to look. Like for people who aren't familiar with this, that's the way to look at the fact that Compass bought Anywhere. It would be equivalent to Burger King buying McDonald's or Pepsi buying Coca-Cola. It's that huge. And what this means with this consolidation is we're going to start seeing a big rise in pocket listings. One of the big things they want to do is keep pocket listings. They want pocket listings to be the norm. They want to make sure that they have control over these listings. You control the listings, you control the market. It's like a movie. Like, you control the story, right? You control what happens in it. It's the same thing with this. They want to control the market. And it's all about profit, no matter what anybody tells me or how everybody does it. And like, listen, I'm not knocking anybody for doing it. I mean, if I run a company, I want to be the most profitable, right? And, one of the big things I talked about, and if you don't believe me, go back and watch the podcast I did about the A&R lawsuit, is that I said from the get-go that we were going to see the business go backwards. In the 80s, each office had their own listings, and you would go in and get the books. I talk about the story. I've told the story a million times. And I said, this lawsuit is going to make people go back to that because essentially it's going to make people, as much as you think you're giving the consumers control, you're actually giving the companies more control. And they're going to start dictating stuff. And one thing I know is that when you start losing money and you can't be as profitable, you're going to change things up. And what they did is these companies were like, well, listen, nothing really changed in the business since the lawsuit got settled. You got to sign a form. But what we can do is now we can spin this and we can make it more profitable. So what are these big companies now doing is that, they're walking into these boardrooms and they're looking around and they're saying like, hey, how do we get our stock prices up? And like, I don't know. What are you guys thinking? What do you think we should do? And then they look at Redfin's and Zillow's and these other third-party sites and like, well, why is their, stock price worth more than ours? And like, that's a good question. Like, well, why, like, what do they do that makes their stock price up? Like, well, they get listings. And like, well, how do they get their listings? And like, well, we just give them to them. They're like, what do you mean? We just give it to them? We just hand them our listings? We say, here you go? And they say, yeah. You say, okay, well, what if we stop giving them our listings? What if we just say, no, you can't have our listings anymore? Do you think that'll affect their stock prices? And all the shareholders probably said, yeah, sure it does. Now, I'm saying that's what happened. I'm just saying, like, probably makes sense to me if I'm sitting in a boardroom of, like, how do we become more profitable? So, you're sure that, I'm sure a conversation like that went down. And if they did a conversation like that, they're like, well, we could probably affect this. But at that time, Compass probably had, they only had 41,000 agents, but they had influential agents. Their agents do a lot of business. They're good agents. I got nothing. And by the way, I'm not like saying anything bad about Compass. I'm just telling you what's happening in the industry. This is just facts. So you're thinking that happens, and it's like, okay, well, you got 41,000 agents. That makes a difference, but it doesn't make, it's not going to change the entire marketplace, right? But then when you get Anywhere involved and you got them, and now you're, got 350 some odd thousand agents, you decide not to give a Zillow or Redfin any listings, like, yeah, that'll make a big difference. I bet you they probably have 60 to 70% of listings between those, Now, a lot of the stuff that they acquired is dead weight. I mean, a lot of these companies haven't been relevant in years. But what people don't realize is the data is relevant, right? Isn't that what a lot of people do is they buy data? Like, so they're getting all that data. They're getting the brand recognition already underneath that are kind of umbrella. So they're instantly just taking over market share. So it's kind of like, it's like a war. It's the Blitzkrieg approach, right? They're going in hard. They're going in heavy. They're scaring everybody else around, and they're hoping that there's not a long-term play that's gets them off. And if they move quick and they move fast enough and they're tough enough and they intimidate their people, they'll be able to win. And that's what happens. And that's business, and that's what they're doing. Now they could run into America like ourselves, right? Fight back a little bit, start building, But my point is that for the meantime, they're going to be able to control the story, which is by having all those listings. So if you have 71% or 70% of the listings, it's going to change where the market is, And I think that's going to be a big one to watch. So when we say like, well, what does this consolidation mean? It's like, well, let's take a look for pocket listings, because now if they want to keep their stuff in-house and the consumer can't find it in other sites, you're just going to go there to look. So for buyers, a bunch of stuff I've read, which kind of makes sense, is the golden age of looking online dead. Is it going to change? Are we going to go back to the 80s? Instead of having books, you'll just have exclusive websites. Will we go more subscription-based, right? So subscription-based means that Netflix shows you can't get on Apple, and Apple shows you're not getting on Amazon, and Amazon you're not getting on Paramount, etc. So what everybody wants to do to be more profitable is they want their listings to be able to be, if you want them on Zillow, you're going to have to pay for them. Zillow will have to pay them for them. If you want them on Redfin, you'll have to pay for them. And then agents will pay, for them to get on subscriptions and go on there. And guess what? That charge will go back to the consumer, right? Because all these costs in our industry have gone up. I get it. A lot of people hate agents, and I'm sure anybody that watches this is going to comment on how we're terrible, and every agent's just a door opener. We're terrible. But I'll agree with you on 90% of agents. I completely agree with you on that. But for 10% of agents, they do it very well. Okay, so let's for the TikToker, Instagram out there that's giving me hate on there, just remember there are people who are good at their jobs. There's terrible doctors out there, there's terrible teachers out there, but there's ones that are very good as well. It's the same thing with real estate. But you do have to realize is that our cost has gone up in every aspect. Our, staff has gone up, our rent has gone up. Our media prices have gone up. We have to spend way more to get our property to be seen with all the information out there, but our commissions have remained the same. When people talk about, home prices have gone up, it's yeah, but everything else has gone up, right? And then if we start going to subscription based, I can see a world where people are going to start charging more money for that as well. But that is a big thing to kind of watch out for. Is what I think is going to happen is going to be more subscription based pricing, where if you're a home buyer and you're going to start looking for places, you'll have to have an account at Zillow, you have to have an account on Redfin, you have an account on, all these companies' website, you have to have an account on Compass, you have one on every single site that you pay for, not just free, that you pay for. Now, I do think that there's a possibility where agents will have exclusivity where I'll be able to pay. So one of the reasons you'll be able to work with me, I'm paying for you to have access for all these sites and I'll give them to you. I think that's probably more realistic, but some people are more doom and gloom. So we're looking at both sides of this, right? Both sides. I'm not saying this is what's going to happen. I'm saying this could happen. And then I think that's a possibility as well. Why do most people really want them to be private though? What do you think is the big driving force? My big takeaway is it's just profitable. It's more profitable if your company sells it, right? So if my company, not mine person, but if I'm a big company and I sell it to another company, we get a cut and then the other company gets a cut, right? But if my company sells it to two different agents in the same company, I get a cut and then I still get a cut because it's my other agent doing it. And then my profit goes up 50%, right? So you have to think about it from a business aspect. That's how, a lot of these companies are looking at it. Now, my takeaway is that the best route for the consumer? Well, the answer would be no. How does I keep telling people is how do the consumers win in this aspect? Who's winning on that? If people already hate real estate agents and they think we make too much money. Now you're talking about hey, we want to make more money. And the consumer's supposed to be yeah, I'm okay with that. Because I haven't met anybody yet that appreciates that we make any money. In fact, I think if it was up to the consumer, we'd make $0. Which I get. Again, I see everybody's point of view. I would love to go to the doctor and I would love the doctor to pay me money for going. That's essentially what everybody asks us to do. Or you go to school and the teacher's hey, here's $50,000 just for sending your kid in. We appreciate you having it. That's how everybody else wants business to be done. But unfortunately, that's just not how the world works. But I can't imagine the consumers just going to continue to be okay with them making more money. And the way I look at it is how the business is going to be with these pockets is we need them to continue. I actually like that they continue to harp up doing pocket listings personally. My ratio of winning listings has been 100% since this whole thing has happened. I haven't lost one yet. And the argument comes up at every listing appointment where a seller says, hey, what do you think about this whole pocket listing thing? So again, when we're spinning this whole thing about what do I is it good or a bad thing? And they say, I'm going against these companies. And I always say listen, for anybody out there, I don't ask who I'm going up against. What sellers will tell me is hey, we've interviewed people and they said that they have this strategy that they want to pre-market first. And then if they don't sell in the pockets, they'll open up to the rest of the market. What do I think about that? How do why would I not want to do that? And when I tell people is listen, I get pocket listed as well. Okay, we have access to Zenlist and TAN and the private MLS. And I joke around and say is it really a pocket listing if everybody's really got access to this? It's not really a pocket listing if people are all looking at it. But I'll play into your little game and I'll say, okay, so why don't you tell me as a seller, as I always say to them, okay, so all my competitors out there are listening, here's how I win. Here's how I beat you, okay? I say, you're a buyer, okay? And you want to buy this place. You see it, you walk through it. It's $500,000. You love it. You want to see it. You like it, you see it, you want to buy it. You're you tell your agent, I'm going to buy it. I'll take it at $500,000. I'll take it. Your heart's set on it. You're excited. You got the offer drawn up. And then the agent tells you, hey, we're going to go on the open market. You're going to tell me right now that buyer is now all of us going to be like, you know what? I don't want it anymore. I'm not going to buy it because they're going on the open market with it. I don't want it. Will 1 out of 100 people say that? Sure. Will 99 of 100 people say that? Nope. And as a guy that represents the most buyers personally of what's happened in the city, I'll tell you right now, I've never heard a buyer say that, not once. But do you think that if it goes on the open market, that person that wants it at 500 will still want it for 500, which they will. Now I have one bid, and now I have 3.5 billion people who have internet access. They're going to want it too. So you're going to tell me that that's not going to get me more money? Like in what world does that make sense? I'll debate anybody out there that's watching this, if anybody is, okay, that is willing to sit down and debate me on how pocket listings will get you more money than non-pocket listings. I guarantee you I will wipe the floor with you any day of the week. You will never, first off, you won't out to debate me in anything, but you're definitely not going to out debate me in this topic. You can't win. It's an argument non-winnable because my argument is based off of common sense and the other argument is based off of Kool-Aid drinking. You know, they've taught them the Kool-Aid that, hey, we're more profitable. And God bless you. Like, listen, I'm not hating on the fact that like you want to do what's best for your team. Awesome. Good for you. But like you can't beat me on saying that like you can't get more money. I could give you 1,000 examples off the top of my head. There's a great example on LinkedIn. Just Google it. LinkedIn Pocket Listing Compass. It'll come right up. And it talks about how somebody did one of those exclusives and they wanted $1 million and you know, they got it and then the deal died and the lady was hesitant and she went on the open market and she ended up getting 1-1. So she left $100,000 on the table by going in the pockets. Okay. So like my point is that's going to keep adding up. I can't wait for like, you know, everybody's so happy is that like, I see this happening. I know for a fact it's going to happen because one of the other big arguments about this is that people say, well, our agents are the best. It's like, well, you got 375,000 agents now or 350,000 agents. So not every one of those is going to be best. I'll guarantee you're going to have, and I know a lot of these agents. Okay. I know a lot of these agents. I know a lot of them aren't the sharpest tools in the shed. Okay. That's just God honest reality. Okay. I meet them all the time. And I'm telling you right now, one of those people, it only takes one to make a mistake. Will 100 make a mistake out of 375,000? I think so. And here's going to be the scenario that's going to play out. Somebody's going to sell one of these private listings and they're going to sell it for $1 million. And that person's going to go out to dinner with their friend and they're going to say, yeah, you know, they're going to say, how's everything been? Oh, it's great. We're moving out of the city. You know, we just sold our place before it hit the market. We got $1 million. It was great. And the person across from the dinner table is going to be like, oh, you know, we got other people we were just out to dinner with. They're looking right by you. They would have loved your place. You sold it for what? Yeah, I sold $1 million. And like, oh, that sounds great. Like, good for you, blah, blah, blah. And then the friend that they tell it to is going to go back home that night. And the next morning, like, hey, we were just out to dinner with John and Steve. And they sold their place. Too bad you missed it. It was $1 million. Like, oh, we didn't even see it. We didn't even know it existed. That sold for how much? Sold for $1 million? Can you call them back up and tell them I'll give them, you know, 1.2? That's right up. That's exactly what we'd want. We'll give them 1.2. And then they call up their friends they're out to dinner with. They're like, hey, our friends that we told you about would have bought it. They would have gave you an extra $200,000. What do you think is going to happen in that scenario? Because you think that's not going to happen. You get another thing telling. Everything I always say is going to happen happens. And that makes me sound like a total jerk. But like, it's because like everything I think about in this industry is complete and utter common. This is like real world, how the actual world works. And then everybody else tries to tell me like in a perfect, like imaginary land, Stranger Thing type situation, this is how they think it works. And I'm like, well, I live in the actual world. Like I walk down the street, there's sidewalks underneath me. Like I'm not walking on clouds. So like you can tell me what you think is going to happen, but I'm going to tell you what I know is going to happen. And that situation is going to happen. It's going to happen over and over and over and over again. And somebody out of 375,000 people are going to make a mistake, and those mistakes are going to add up, and you're going to get a big lawsuit. That's going to be it. And they're going to talk about like, and then people are going to say, well, that's not going to happen because the seller signs an agreement stating that they were okay with it. And I'm going to be like, okay, well, sellers sign an agreement saying that you're going to pay a buyer's agent commission, and you got sued for $1 billion. So tell me how I'm wrong in that situation. Like contracts don't matter in the current state of the country that we're in right now. They're irrelevant. Okay. So, and how do I know that? Is there was billions of dollars of lawsuits, which is why Anywhere just got bought by Compass. Because, you know, personally, I just don't think they could come back from that lawsuit. So they literally got sold and bought up by the person they hated more than life itself. And they had to, because it was either that or probably go bankrupt. That's only, I don't know that for a fact, but I'm just saying like, hey, this is what we saw happen. So when we talk about where is this heading, it's like, that's a possibility. But to me, why do I think they're pumping up these pocket listings so much? I think that's a big reasoning. That's a big reasoning. And for me, I think it's a bad move for consumers, and I think it's a bad move for the industry. Now, on the flip side of that, you know, let's play devil advocate. It's like, well, why should Zillow then get access to that for free? So if I'm an agent, they're like, why should I just give it away, right? Why shouldn't I get paid for it? And what I tell you is like, it's not yours. Like you don't own the house. Your job is to advertise the property to try to get as many eyeballs on it as you can to sell. Back in the days, I've told the story a million times, the only way somebody could see it is going to the office, looking at an outside picture. For everybody out there that doesn't know, the MLS used to also have an in-house photographer who would drive around, and you would get one picture, and it would go on the outside, and it would go inside the book, and that's what you'd have. Okay, it'd be a Polaroid picture of the outside. And then on Saturdays, you would open up your property for what they would call an open house, so people can actually see what the property looked like for the first time. And that's how they sold properties. Now we have this thing called the internet. And now you're saying that we should be able to take that internet away from people and not give people full disclosure. I'm just saying, like, Zillow is just part of those disclosures. But now you have to also compete with the new technology that they have rolling out. So when you're also talking about, like, well, pockets are good because I could just keep them to exclusive people, it's like, well, Zillow just rolled out the ChatGPT thing, right? So you go on there, talk about what you want, and then ChatGPT will just, give it to you. And it's going to say right in there. And you're going to be like, well, Compass will probably come out with that, and so Anywhere and all these other stuff. It's like, yeah, they will, but it's just more exposure. It's more eyeballs on it, okay? And when we talk about where do I think is best for the consumer, it's all about, like, I'm just about transparency, right? The more transparent I think we are, the better it is, whether you like it or not. So you got to make a couple extra less bucks because your company's not doing it. I'm not just picking on, Compass or anybody else. I'm talking about any big company in the country right now that I just don't think it's probably the best route to go for consumer transparency. What about sellers? Why does it make more sense for sellers to go on sites? As I stated before, the more people who see it, the better your odds are to sell. It's like going to the casino, right? If I go to the casino, it's like, what are my odds, right? If I, go and play blackjack, what are my odds on that? If I'm playing, what's the game with, what do you call the number? Roulette? If I go to roulette and I put all my money on, 24, it's my favorite number, my odds aren't as great if I just pick red or black, right? If I just pick red, my odds are going to be better than I just pick a number. So again, it's like, what, you think it's more odds? Yeah, but I'm saying it's 50-50 you're black. Well, technically it's not 50-50, it's like 40-something% if you're black or red, right? Rather than if you just pick a number. My point is that you put it on as many sites as possible, the better the odds are you to sell. Let me give you an example. We have people all the time that fly in from out of town to buy a place. And they do what I call house porn. Beforehand, they sit on Redfins and Zillows and Realtor.coms and all these other websites, and they just search for houses. And a lot of times, they don't have access to an agent yet. So then they find an agent online. They're like, hey, we're going to see these, and we're available these days and times when we come in this weekend, and we'll knock them out, and they'll buy that weekend. That's it. It happens to me every single weekend. Every weekend that I've been alive in this business, I have done that exact scenario. And there's been times where we're in a building and like, hey, like there's 2 other ones for sale in the building. Like you didn't send me to them, but like I emailed you to make sure that you saw them before a tour existed. And like, I don't know if you didn't see it, but like we're kind of tight on time, but did you want to try to see those? And like, you know what? We're good with this one. Let's just buy this one. And they buy that one. And then the other 2 are still there. And the other 2 maybe weren't on the open market or they didn't know about it, etc. Now, I've sold many listings that way because, and my seller's like, wait, we're priced $10,000 more than the other guys. Like, why are they buying ours and the other one? I'm like, listen, like they didn't see it. I'm not going to bring it to their attention. So like sign this thing and be done with it. That happens as well. So that's another thing that you're missing out on. You know, I know a lot of people are going to tell me, well, like it's a great way to price stuff and pockets are the greatest idea ever. And this whole consolidation is going to be better for the industry. It's like, listen, pockets are good in certain aspects. Okay. So I'm not hating on all of them. There's certain things I think pockets are good. Here's one. You got kids, can't move till June. It's January. You're like, hey, I want to see like what I could get for my place. I want $1 million. I'm like, dude, like you're worth like 900,000, best case scenario. And they're like, no, I think I could get $1 million. All right, well, why don't we pocket list it? You got till June. We won't add any market time or anything like that on it. And let's go in the pockets and see what happens. Okay, that's a good scenario. Here's another good scenario. You got tenants in there. Okay. Tenants in the place, it shows like crap, but it's a hot market, but we don't want to just burn market time because the pictures can be terrible. We're coming up on holiday season. That's a good time to do pockets, right? You know, day one, you want to go to the market. We can't list till December 1st. Maybe the market where you're at's kind of bad. I would say, hey, let's pocket list it. Let's not burn up that market time going after the first of the year. You're a celebrity. You got health problems, right? Certain things like that. Good thing to go in the pocket. So I'm not saying that all pockets are bad. I think that's important. So if anybody's actually watching this, okay, let's make it to this point where I'm not saying like all of these are bad. I'm saying that there are certain scenarios where it makes sense, but 75 to 80% of the time, I think it's in the consumer's best interest and the seller's best interest to go on the active market. Is there a 10 to 20% time where it doesn't? Yeah, 100%. I'll agree with that all day long. I'll definitely take you up on that. And I think it's a good idea and a good strategy in certain cases. But for your general run-of-the-mill type property, which is more than 80% of listings, I think it's a bad idea. Will companies all go back to in-house like the 80s? I think there's going to be a lot more exclusives. I think exclusivity is going to make a comeback. How that's going to play out is going to be yet to see. There's a lot of people who are talking about this consolidation. They're like, well, we're still going to be independently owned and we're still going to do our things their own way and blah, blah, blah. And I laugh about it because like anybody who's ever worked in corporate, not that I've worked in corporate, but I see a lot of stuff in corporate, but I did work at like Best Buy when I was a kid. Okay. And like, I remember when we bought stuff, like when they would like buy other products and companies, like, yeah, those companies still like had their company, but like ultimately what Best Buy said, that's what happened. Okay. And that's how this is going to work. Like, yeah, you're independently owned and like, yeah, you can kind of have some sort of flexibility, but ultimately corporate comes down on you with the hammer. You're doing what corporate says, and that's final. Their word will be final. So if they say we're only doing exclusivity, then they'll do exclusivity. And that means that they won't go on. And if that happens, I do think you'll start seeing other bigger companies do more exclusivity as well, right? Because then it'll be like a mimic effect, okay? So nobody can predict what's going to happen. I think they may try that. I think that might be something they try. And I think that people will see that it may not work. Because we also have to remember right now, and this is the thing, everybody's always the knee-jerk reaction, narrow-minded society that we're in. It drives me crazy. I remember in 2019 when we had the Zillow guys on the podcast here, and iBuying was all the rage. So nobody even remembers iBuying. But everybody said realtors were going to be done, iBuying was going to be it. And we had them on here, and we replayed the click, and I said, well, what are you going to do when the market's bad? Or something happens to the economy, or something crazy happens? And they say, well, we don't think that's going to happen. I said, so you don't think anything ever bad's going to happen? Ever? They said, no. And I said, well, what are you going to do when you're going to sitting on all that inventory? And it doesn't sell right away, and you're eating the taxes and assessments, the mortgage, and all that stuff. Like, do you think that's going to be a profitable business model? Because in 19, that year was really good. And they're like, no, I don't think anything's going to happen. And then this thing happened less than a year after that podcast. Some of you guys may remember it. It was this thing called COVID. Okay, COVID hit. People weren't leaving their houses as much. The iBuying companies lost their money. iBuying closed. Okay, Zillow's iBuying program went down. Purple Bricks or whatever it's called, all those companies went down. I don't even remember their names. They're irrelevant. They're all gone. iBuying doesn't exist anymore. And everybody told me iBuying is going to be the future. I said, well, in a good market, it can work. Bad market or a mediocre market probably won't work. Obviously, who was right in that front? So when we look at more exclusivity, here's what we also have to think is not being a prisoner of the moment of what's happening today. Today, the average property in the suburbs or like Lincoln Park is selling pretty much in a day. You put it on the market, you get a line of cars around the corner, it's sold, and that's it. Tell somebody in Austin, Texas, where there's double amount of sellers than there are buyers, that they only want to list in the pockets. Tell somebody in River North that's got, 10 plus months of inventory above $1 million that they only want to go in the pockets and see what happens. See, these ideas work really well when things don't sell in the day, okay? Or when things do sell in the day. But they don't work well when things don't sell in the day. Because here's what's going to happen. Let me just tell you, and we're going to clip this. So I'm going to say clip, 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 clip. So we know when to grab this. So when it happens, I can be like, remember when I said this then. Here's what'll happen. You're going to go on the market. It'll be 2 years from now. And things won't sell in the day. And the seller is going to be like, hey, we're in this exclusivity. We're not on the open market. And their neighbor comes on, same house. You got to remember, most of America, majority of America in these suburbs are spec houses. They're all the same. There's like 100 of the same homes. They look like the same. It looks like something out of a movie. They're all the same houses. So you're an exclusive. You're not on the open market because you're trying to do like this whole cool thing. And then the neighbor comes on, open market. Neighbor sells weekend, okay? Gets a great price. You're still on the market. What do you think that seller is going to say? Now, if you've never had a listing before, you'll be like, oh, they'll probably be okay with it. And we'll have like one semi-tough conversation. Like, people are nuts. Let me just like put that very clearly. People are freaking nuts. People will talk at you like you've never been talked to. When something happens, we've left the closet light on before in a listing, and you would have thought it was World War III. Like, I've never been belittled like that. We left the closet light on. Just left the closet. That was it. Closet light left on. Nothing happened. They were home about 45 minutes after the showing. Closet light left on. You'd have thought like I beat a kid up or something like that. Like I can't even describe what happened. We got fired from the listing, okay? Like they went ballistic. They said we didn't care about their place. And, when that happens, you all know that there's something else going on, one, in their life, because this psychopath has to have, like, you go that crazy, like, you're just mentally not there. But also, like, there's other, there's that old saying, like, they throw everything at the kitchen sink at you, like, that's that. But that was over a Claus Light. Imagine when your neighbor sells and you just took a job in Dallas and you haven't sold and you sold this pocket thing, what's going to happen to you? Think about that, because that will happen. It's going to happen. And here's how I can tell you I know it's going to happen, because I lived that life. When I first got in the business, I sold in the suburbs. I stopped selling in the suburbs because nothing sold. My entire career, nothing sold in the suburbs that quick. My entire career. Yeah, there's things here and there that would sell, but overall, I always said that you want to be liked but not loved when you went on listing appointments when we sold houses. Used to just start in the burbs. Now we have an office in the burbs, so we do sell in the burbs again now. But when I first started, you want to be liked but not loved. You want to be liked because you want to be remembered, but you don't want to be loved because you want to get hired first. Because the first guy always got fired and the second or third guy sold the house. Just what happened. So like my point again is, like, a lot of these strategies sound good today, but will these strategies sound good in the future? So when people freak out about where the industry's heading and is this going to have that big of an effect, it's like, well, let's just not think about like the hottest market in history. Let's also think about like how is this going to play out when it's the worst market in history. We haven't seen the worst market in history in about 12 years. Okay. We had a little glimpse of a bad market on an overall American basis for the first like 2 months of COVID, like a little glimpse. Okay. But now nowhere near it. If you sell downtown Chicago, you're still living through that glimpse. You know what it takes to sell a house. Okay, you sell downtown Chicago, you know what it takes. You're selling only in Lincoln Park or Wicker Park or the suburbs, you don't know what it takes. Not in the last 7 or 8 years. You have no idea what it takes. You've been just riding the market. Go tell somebody in Austin they know how to sell a house. Biggest buyer's market in the country. A lot of people are wondering, will indie brokers, small companies, the other people that aren't bought up, how will they be able to compete? How will they be able to survive, right? Because that's the big question I get. A lot of people ask me personally. I mean, we own a small brokerage. They say, how are we going to be able to compete with the big people? There's always been big things that happened. I mean, like back in the day, like the Remaxes were everything. If you weren't in fact, my old man, his first office he started was a Remax. Okay, and he broke away from it because he didn't want to do it anymore and started his own company. And obviously, we're still here. Like there will always be big things that happen, disruptors. And in the late '90s, when the internet started to kind of become something, there was a website called forsalebyowner.com. That came into fruition, and everybody said that was going to be the end of real estate agents, and we would never survive anymore. And then, of course, we saw what happened there. Lawsuit got taken place, right? That's the most recent one. Said, every single publication said real estate commissions would drop on average by 50%, and nobody would ever use realtors anymore. Commissions have gone up. That's just a fact. But commissions have gone up in the country since that got passed. So there's always going to be things that are going to happen. People are nervous. The biggest question a lot of people ask me as a name broker, well, how will I compete if they only put them on their sites? Here's what I'll tell you right now. One, there's probably going to be a subscription, so I'll pay for the site. Whatever. You win. I'll give you money. It's fine. Here's the other thing. Like, I'm going to blow you guys' minds. You guys ready for this one? I'll just have my guys sign up on their site and they'll search on there. Huh? Isn't that crazy? It's a crazy idea. And then somebody's going to be like, well, you want your clients to search on a competitor's website? They already do right now, right? There's not a single client I know that's not on Redfin. That's a competitor. They're not on Zillow, which is going to go to 1,000 different buyer's agents. They're not on Realtor.com, which sell your leads. Homes.com sells it. Everybody sells their leads. What do I care? They'll just be on Homes, or they'll be on Compass, or whatever. Remax, whatever site they have it. Who cares? If you're good at your job, people are going to want to work with you. If you suck at your job, people won't want to work with you. It's always playing scared. That's why people say they don't want to do it, because they're scared. If you're not good, you should be scared. If you're good at a job, it's like, go ahead. It's like people are jealous, right? Jess, you ever date a guy that's jealous? You go out, meet another person, they get nervous, you're going to go to somebody else because they know they're not good enough, right? If you know you're good enough, I'm not worried. Go ahead, do whatever you want. Like, you know what I mean? You can go have fun. I'm here. Like, I'm here watching TV. I got nothing to worry about because I'm confident in myself, right? So if I'm good at my job, what do I care? Go look at a million. Go to open houses. Talk to Steve Smith or whoever. It doesn't matter to me. Like, I know what I have to offer. Now, I'm not saying that as a jerk. What I'm saying is that, like, I'm also not going to play scared that I have to, like, give everything up because, like, somebody might have it in their own website itself. Like, they're still going to have it on a website, which we're all going to have access to. It's just ridiculous. It's just scary. I hate people that use fear mongering to win. It reminds me, again, the best example is when the lawsuit got passed and everybody called me saying real estate's done. Go look at the podcast. I was like, well, it doesn't really make sense. It'll be done. It'll wipe out and clean up some of the fat, which it has. And like in this, it'll probably clean up some of the brokers that don't. There's a lot of companies out there that are terrible. They don't do anything. They give us a bad look. Will that, this consolidation make them go down? Yeah. And like, I don't hate, and people probably won't make it this far, but it's not like I'm hating on the big companies for what they're doing. I respect the fact that, hey, they're a business. They got shareholders they got to report to. And if this is what they got to do, that's great. And, they're going to hopefully help make the industry harder to get into and help make the industry more professional. But it doesn't mean like we're going to close shop. Doesn't mean like we're screwed. Doesn't mean we can't exist anymore. It's just like anything in life. You got to pivot. When things change, you just pivot, and you figure it out. There's always going to be a way to figure things out. Somebody's always going to win. So you either cry about like how you lose, or you just figure it out and you're going to continue to keep going forward here. Let's see here. Will sellers change the way they list? I think some will, and I think some won't. And I think overall, in the long run, these consolidations is just going to be, ultimately, it's not going to change like listing presentations like completely. It's not going to mean everything's just going to go pre-market and then open market. It doesn't mean any of that. People have done pre-market prior to this consolidation. They've been doing it for years, 10 years plus. I sit on a lot of boards on this. I do a lot of consultations for this type of stuff where we give advice on this. So no, I don't think sellers on a wide scale basis are going to completely change everything. I think that in some aspects, things might go private for a little bit more, but at that time, by the time it kicks in, we'll probably see the market change and we'll see how well that works. But again, you can't play scared on it. You just have to know that, times, real estate will always change. You just always got to adapt or you die. That's really all I got for you today. We'll have to watch how these consolidations kind of take effect long term. And stay tuned for our next episode. Thanks for listening to Laricy Live.